Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Music Over Mind. And today we have Miss Acosta here with us to talk about her experience with musical therapy. Miss Acosta, could you introduce yourself?
Yes. Okay. So my name is Melanie Acosta. I am a music therapist. I have been working as a music therapist for, um, gosh, 18 years or something like that.
Wow.
Um, is that right? Is it really been 18 years? Yeah, I think it's something like that. Since around 2008. So maybe,
Wow.
yeah, not quite, but yeah, close.
Yeah, that's a long
Um,
time.
yeah. And before that, I was a professional singer. I was doing musical theater based out of New York City, and I kind of traveled a lot of different places. I lived overseas in Europe for a while, just working as a singer, and then I decided to pursue music therapy, and yeah, I've been working ever since. Right now, I'm working in a NICU, a neonatal
Mhm.
intensive care unit.
Uh-huh.
I'm an independent contractor, and
Uh-huh.
I also work with adults and children who have had traumatic brain injuries.
Wow.
I've done a lot of work with kids with autism,
Hmm.
on the autism spectrum and different developmental disabilities.
Hmm.
And I've had just kind of sprinklings of different populations. I worked in hospitals a couple of times. Um, yeah, so I'm happy to be here. I'm also teaching intro to music therapy at UC Berkeley. So
Hmm.
thank you for
Wow.
inviting me.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for coming. This is really exciting. So since you, of course, started with Broadway and doing live music, and then you went to musical therapy, I was wondering, when did you decide that music therapy was what you wanted to do and that it was something you were interested in?
Yeah, okay, so that's actually an interesting story. I was in New York City on in 2001. I had just moved back from London, had just done a show there, and September 11th happened,
Mhm.
right? And so everybody knows what September 11th was, and
Right.
and it was such a traumatic moment for New York City.
Wow,
And
yeah.
so, basically the world shut down and New York City shut
Hmm.
down, and there was nothing, and if you weren't a first responder or some sort of healthcare worker, there you just kind of
Hmm.
walked around wondering like, what should I do?
Hmm.
Um, and then after that, it was, of course, very difficult to find work,
Hmm.
as a performer. But the first
Right.
show I got was a concert tour that went around to all these really small towns in the US. And the show itself was kind of built around this ideas of, strength and resilience, and, kind of was, capturing the essence that was going on in this country at the time. It was kind of,
Right.
support for each other and support for the country and everything. Um, and what the difference with that show, I think, I mean, in addition to the songs being sort of these anthems and really big, emotional
Hmm.
emotional songs,
Right.
um, after the show, we would go out into the audience and talk to them, which is very
Oh,
different from when you're
wow.
doing a musical theater show. Um,
Uh-huh.
so I think being able to hear people talk about how much of an impact we had on them. Like one of them, I remember telling me she hasn't gotten out of bed for 3 months. This was
Wow.
November after September 11th, so it was two couple of months, maybe
Right.
three. It was probably December actually. And she
Hmm.
said, I
Hmm.
haven't gotten out of bed in 3 months, and your show just made me cry, and it really made me feel
Wow.
so good, and it just it really is the first time I heard sort of the impact that music had with her.
Wow.
So we did that, for that tour for a few months, and then I went back to New York, and then I guess I had been working in theater for probably close to 13 years or something at that point, and especially given what had just happened, I just wanted to see what could I do that would use music where I could actually help people somehow.
Hmm.
And I really didn't know what that meant, but I finally just started doing some research, and I just ran across some videos on it wasn't even a video, it was a morning talk show, and
Uh-huh.
the person was interviewing a little boy that had autism, and they were showing some videos of how he had been so withdrawn and he didn't speak, and he was really just closed up and isolated in his own world.
Wow.
and
Yeah.
um and I but then what they said was, through the use of music therapy and auditory therapy, they opened him up to this world of music, playing music, and he when I saw him on this show, he was playing the piano and he was a jazz musician. And it turned out he was probably like 12 years
Mm.
old. Um, he was, just innately incredibly musical.
Right.
And he loved jazz music. And so they were interviewing him and he was talking about his favorite jazz artists. And I was just fascinated. I thought, wow, I mean, from the videos of him just isolated in his own world, he wouldn't talk to anyone. He was just kind of showing kind of stereotypical things you've seen on TV about people who are just overstimulated and trying to just stay in his own world. And just to hear him
Mm.
talking to someone about music,
Wow.
that just introduced me to the concept of music therapy. I thought, what is music therapy? So I just started researching that, and I lived in New York City, and so I just ran across the NYU music therapy department, at NYU, and then also a company called the Nordhoff Robbins approach to music therapy, and they had some videos online as well. And
Mhm.
I just started watching a lot of videos, and it sounded amazing, and so I just started
Wow.
researching. And then
Mhm.
ever since then, I've been doing music therapy.
That's such an incredible story. Wow. I love how like sometimes such sad circumstances can lead you into like doing something so incredible. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of stay open and see what your passions are leading you towards. A lot of times, you
Exactly.
just if your eyes are open, you'll kind of run into it yourself, or it'll run into you, is what I kind of
Uh-huh.
look at it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's so I feel like for me, it was kind of similar because I loved music so much, but I never really thought about it in that way until like I was hanging out with my grandparents in India, and my grandpa was really struggling with Parkinson's disease, and the only time I saw him really very receptive and like excited to do something was when we would have like family karaoke and do like music together, and that's what really opened me to music therapy too. So I think it's so crazy how circumstances can bring you to such an incredible discovery.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is so you teach the intro to music therapy at Berkeley, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things I was really interested in is how music and like the brain really work together, and if you have anything that you would like to talk about in terms of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much research going on about the brain's responses to music, and there are approaches in music therapy that really kind of focus specifically on that. Um, And I have some different trainings, there are different certifications across, different areas that would give you different, perspectives and approaches. And one of them is very specific to just the neurological approaches. So, working with people who've had traumatic brain injuries, a lot of times, when you listen to music and play music, um, you really light up all different areas of the brain all over.
Right,
And sometimes you can actually bypass some of the damaged areas and reconnect to different healthy areas. For example, with speech reacquisition after someone's had a stroke or some sort of other traumatic brain injury, there's
right.
speech centers on one side of the brain, but there's also small speech centers on the other side of the brain. And so you can actually, let's say you're stuck, because you have damage on one side. You can actually, through music, because you've activated these different areas of the brain, you can actually reconnect to those centers. So, using melody and rhythm and tempo in a lot of different aspects, with whether it be physical therapy or speech, you can actually reach some of these goals, whether it be creating sounds, activating that speech center
Mhm.
through tapping. There's some interventions that require it's a melody and rhythm, but you usually tapping with the opposite hand to try to
Oh,
activate the opposite side of the brain, which is where that small speech center is, on
right.
the opposite side. So by tapping out the rhythm of the speech that you're trying to say, the simple syllables that you're
Oh,
trying to speak, then you can actually help the person to kind of activate the speech centers. So I've been using that a
wow.
lot with I do a lot of co-treatments with speech therapists
Right.
and physical therapists.
Uh-huh.
And so I use that approach a lot. And then with PT, like with physical therapy, um, so when you're sitting let's say you're sitting outside and someone walks by and has music playing and you don't want to listen to their music, right? But
Right,
then all of a
right.
sudden you realize you're tapping your foot to their music, but you didn't know that you're tapping your foot to their music,
Oh
right?
yeah.
The auditory input that you get can actually bypass, some of these other cognitive areas and go straight to the motor. So
Oh,
so it preps your muscles, and so you actually start tapping your foot, and it's not necessarily that you're conscious that you're tapping your foot. So that's the kind
wow.
of idea that we use a lot. um, so that when working with, for example, people with Parkinson's who have this kind of shuffle when they walk,
Right,
right?
right.
To be able to get them to walk on a sort of steady, stable, and smooth tempo,
Oh
we use a
yeah.
lot of um, tempo and rhythm, whether it be
Wow.
playing live, guitar, setting up the tempo through that, or playing drums. I mean, a metronome works as well, but you want patient preferred music, right? To be playing of
Uh-huh.
some sort or something that will kind of intrinsically motivate the person as well.
Right.
But just using all of these different elements of music, and then going off of the way that the brain responds to that music, it's kind of amazing what kind of therapeutic goals you can reach.
Wow, yeah. I never even thought of that. Like music in a way that can help your like motor skills. I mostly thought
Hmm.
of it as like a brain thing. Yeah. And so you're someone who's worked in musical therapy for such a long time, and I was wondering if you could kind of take us through a day in your life and what it looks like to like work in musical therapy and how like a day goes in that life.
Okay. Sure. So first, I just want to kind of point out this music therapy is as opposed to musical therapy. I know that's like a sort of a pet peeve of mine, right? It's just
Oh,
music therapy is the actual like terminology.
okay,
Um,
okay.
but so music therapy, um, let's see, a day in the life. I mean, it really depends on where you're working, right? Because I've
Mm-hmm.
worked in a lot of different places, but like right now, I'm working in two different units in the hospital. One is I said is the NICU with the
Mm-hmm.
infants,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then the other is the either adults or children with traumatic brain injury. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say in the morning, I'm going to stay in the NICU. First, I'll look and see what babies um, we want to see. And now, the way that we use music for the infants is we really take this idea of it's called entrainment. Now, entrainment is a sort of phenomenon that one body can influence another body's tempo, um, just by coming into close proximity. I think the easiest way to understand that is if you have a lot of pendulums swinging at different tempos,
Mm-hmm.
then eventually they will synchronize. And so
Wow, yeah.
it's a phenomenon that started off a long time ago, with this idea of music therapists talk about ISO principle. It's the idea that if you meet someone where they are, you can actually, once you're connected and then called, I guess, entrained, you can actually change that person, whether it be their mood or whether it be their physiological or biological rhythms. So in the NICU, these babies are so immature. Their systems are so
Oh,
immature. They're not ready to process all the sounds. There's lights,
right.
there's poking and there's prodding and alarms and just all kinds of babies, other babies crying. And
Mhm.
they've come out so early that they're not meant to be, exposed to that kind of sound. So it can be very
Right.
traumatic and
Mm.
stress inducing, and their cortisol levels will rise and they'll just be stressed a
Right.
lot. And that can be very damaging for them down the road. So, what we're there for is to try to help these babies stay regulated, stay
Mm.
calm, so that their vital signs, their respiratory rates, their heart rates, their oxygen saturations all stay within their normal limits. Right?
Mhm.
So we'll come and use music, whether it be humming, gentle, just one tone, humming two tones. Like there are several vocal interventions that we use, um, all the way up to singing songs. Now, of course, depending on the age and the sensitivity of the baby, we'll be watching those babies to see, we take away our stimulation if they start to show any signs at all. There's a long
Mhm.
list of signs of overstimulation. But we use that idea of entrainment, of let's say let's meet their respiratory rate, and if it's a little bit fast, we'll meet them where they are, and then we'll slow that tempo a little
Wow.
bit, and the goal always being to help them calm, regulate, and move into deeper sleep states, into
Mhm.
more regulated breathing patterns,
Mhm.
um, things like that, just to help them so that all they have to do is just, heal and grow, feed
Mhm.
and grow in the NICU. So that's kind of what we do with babies. We sometimes will work with a physical therapist
Mhm.
because they have to have, PT every day or have to have these movements, and that can be stressful. So introducing that again, using melody, tempo, rhythm, um, in a way that's appropriate for this baby's age and the responses,
Mhm.
help them kind of make sense of what they're feeling, right? So if they're moving their
Right.
arms, if the PT's moving their arms a certain way, up and down, then if we add the auditory, we add the music and the melody to that, it can actually help that baby understand this movement that's happening to their arm. It gives a sort of
Wow.
organizational framework
Uh-huh.
to them. So of course, it's all based on their own personal levels of being able to tolerate the different stimuli. But we, follow them, follow their cues, and we use music to just keep them calm.
Wow.
And then in the NICU, having a baby is so stressful just on
Mhm.
a normal
Mhm.
day. But when you
Of
have a baby
course.
that's that young and so early, then that kind of stress and anxiety and emotional crisis for the parents is
Uh-huh.
really a lot to deal with. So the other thing we do is we work with the parents.
Uh-huh.
Now,
Uh-huh.
sometimes we make recordings, heartbeat recordings of the babies.
Oh, wow.
We always want to work on our goals for the parents are bonding. Bonding is so important in
Right.
those initial stages, right? Caregiver bonding. So when they're holding their baby skin to skin, we'll use music to just help them both relax, to be
Uh-huh.
organized, to everybody to stay calm and stress free. Um, but we might use favorite songs that
Right.
are important to the parent. And then
Uh,
we maybe create lullabies out of them. We might rewrite the lyrics. And
wow.
then sometimes we work with the parents just to address the stress. We might
Mhm.
work on songwriting. They may write special
Oh,
songs
wow.
just for their babies to try to help them process
Uh,
all this different emotion that's going on because it's just a lot for them to
right.
deal
Mhm.
with the ultimate goal of being caregiving, treatment for the caregivers is going to always benefit the infants and trying to work on that, in early caregiver bonding, um, and relaxation for both,
Right.
caregivers and babies. So that's kind of the NICU, kind of in a nutshell.
Right. Actually, interestingly, I was actually in the NICU when I was a baby.
Oh,
Yeah, and
really?
I remember one of the stories my parents told me was my dad was like so stressed and like crying and stuff. And I think that's like so interesting. I feel like I could just tell them about this. I think they would be really interested in that, in this musical
Yeah.
therapy intervention.
Yeah. And I think that, the, the, the parents, they try to be so strong, especially,
Exactly.
depends. Both parents can do this, either the fathers or the mothers. But you're trying to be strong for the other person, trying to
Right.
be strong. But if you don't have an outlet to be able to release some of that stress, it can be really damaging to them, which events,
Exactly.
affects everyone, including the
Uh-huh.
infant.
Right.
So yeah, it's really important for somebody to be there to support the families. And so, it's really kind of fun to work with them to be able to help them just come up with words to process what's happening,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
maybe create songs that can be the song for that, that set of parents and that baby. This is that baby's song, and then we'll use that song when we work with the baby. We might turn it into a
Uh-huh.
lullaby,
Oh
so
my
that it just becomes a
God.
familiar, and then it becomes a source of comfort for everyone.
Yeah,
Um,
that's wow, that's so cool.
and
And
then we make
that's so
recordings.
adorable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes we make recordings of the songs, and then we'll use the baby's heartbeat as the tempo. We set the tempo
Oh
based
my
on it
God,
so that
that's
you hear
so
the
cute.
heartbeat. And yeah, it's really nice as well.
That's so
Um,
cute.
so that's the kind of nutshell what we kind of do in the NICU.
Wow.
And then let's say I'm moving over to the brain injury side or the rehab. It's not just brain
Yes.
injuries. I work with a lot of different types of rehab.
Right.
It's basically just rehab. But
Mm-hmm.
so I may work with, do a co-treatment with a speech therapist, and we work with someone who has had a traumatic brain injury of some sort and is
Yeah.
working on either just increasing their ability to vocalize. Just sometimes it's from the very first levels, can they even open their mouth again and
Right.
turn on their voice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, and then from there, there's just following the steps. Can you now make some sounds, and can we regulate your breathing so that you can actually, because when you've had a traumatic brain injury, sometimes you can't even coordinate how
Right.
to breathe and then make your voice turn on and speak, right? So there's it's really, but music again, tempo, rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
melodic patterns, things that create organization and structure,
Wow.
um, can actually help. You get that entrainment with the breathing, and then every time they take a deep breath in together, you've got the music going in, and then on the exhale, they have the music like somehow emphasizing that release and then helping them turn on their voice, right? And then you can just
Uh-huh.
get an organized breathing pattern. You can start to help them learn to turn on the voice. And then, like I said, there's these different techniques. One of them is called melodic intonation therapy. That's used a lot,
Wow.
where you're using melody and rhythm to help somebody be able to speak
Mm-hmm.
functional phrases. So you'll take a phrase that they might need to say in the hospital, like, you know, my name is Melanie, right?
Uh-huh.
Someone comes in, you want to be able to say something.
Right.
So you introduce a melody. My name is Melanie. My
Uh,
name is Melanie. My
uh-huh.
name is Melanie. Right. So there's this melodic pattern,
Uh-huh.
and you're tapping that with the opposite hand, because usually there's one-sided weakness. Right.
Uh-huh.
Maybe they can use with the other hand, maybe they can't use it at all. So the hand that can work will tap out my name is Melanie, right, on the tempo. My name
Right.
is Melanie. My name is
Oh.
Melanie, right? And we do that together. And then slowly, as if the patient, like, and then with watching my mouth, just being able to see it, you hear the sounds, you're tapping the sounds, right? The brain is going to organize that through the
Mm-hmm.
musical organization that's set up.
Right.
Um, and then it stimulates that speech center so that they can actually imitate that sound. It's
Wow.
depending on the level, you'll start with maybe one word,
Right.
my name, right? You just
Oh.
and then I'll slowly fade my prompts until it's
Mm-hmm.
just them, right? And then it's just that
Right.
repetition, that neuroplasticity of the brain, just a
Wow.
repetition.
Yeah.
And so I've seen some kind of amazing things, especially when working with
Right.
kids. Kids,
Uh-huh.
that's resilient, and their kind of ability to go from like point A to point B, like way up here, is actually
Uh,
pretty profoundly,
uh-huh.
amazing to watch.
Right.
So yeah, so I remember working with a patient who just we kept getting to the brink of being able to say to be able to coordinate the breath, coordinate the mouth, get the mouth
Uh,
open, and all we're waiting for
uh-huh.
is just that next step, which is just make a sound. And then the next time
Uh-huh.
I said hi, and she said hi. I was
Oh my
like, what
God.
happened? Right. So you just watch,
Whoa.
and then once they make these little breakthroughs, it's like it just keeps expanding. So
Wow. That's
so the
incredible.
yeah, so when you get, I think that in music therapy, I mean, it depends on your population, but sometimes progress can be slow,
Hmm.
but sometimes the breakthroughs are they're
Just
fantastic.
fascinating.
It's fascinating to see them, and they're so profound, and they're so moving when they happen.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
they come in a lot of ways. So
Uh-huh. Wow. That's so cool. How the brain is just so incredible, so fascinating.
and then let's say in the NICU, if I was going to work also with a physical therapist,
Uh-huh.
then let's say they want to work on gait, right? The person is trying to walk and then walking longer and longer times. So like I said, that idea of entrainment, of using rhythm, of using tempo, and we watch the person, the way they walk, and the tempo that they're moving. Let's say it's like a cane left, right, or cane, right, left, cane, right, like what something like that. You see the pattern. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3,
Right.
4, right, and then you set that tempo, their tempo, to a
Uh-huh.
rhythm pattern, and then if you create the music that just keeps that rhythm pattern at their
Right.
tempo, right, then you entrain together to that tempo, and
Wow.
then you just set it, and I've seen people just like walk all the way down the hallway in a very
Yeah.
organized way when it was really they were really struggling to keep kind of
Yeah.
organized at first. And then they sit down, and then the PT says, wow, that was almost twice as far as you walked yesterday, right? And so
Hmm.
it's just like, wow, that was really nice. That was really
Yeah.
cool.
Those
So
moments must be so incredible to like
yeah, they are.
witness all the
Yeah,
work you
they
do.
are.
Yeah. Wow. That's
um
incredible.
so that's
And
kind of a snippet of like what my day might look like.
wow, that's incredible. Uh, so moving on, I wanted to ask specifically about your work with kids with autism.
Mhm.
Have you ever dealt with someone who, like, not only in that area, but who doesn't maybe speak the same language or doesn't, like, can't really communicate in that way. And how do you overcome those opportunities?
Yeah, honestly, when I work with kids with autism, um, a lot of times I don't rely on language,
Hmm.
verbal language.
Right.
We can rely on musical language by music in itself um, has organization and form and structure just
Hmm.
innately in it. Um, now, there is something to be said about someone who, let's say, someone comes from another country, directly from another country, and they have a different
Exactly.
musical system. They're
Right.
not raised in Western, music.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think that children, especially, can adapt more
Right.
easily to different musical systems. I mean, if we're talking
Sure.
about systems that use different harmonies and things, different tones than
Yes.
Western, then it would be, you'd have to really know. I think it'd be behoove you as the music therapist to find out what music the
Right.
person is familiar with. But my experience is, especially if we're just dealing with someone who speaks a different language, a lot of times, because in the hospitals, you can use translators, but a lot of times when we actually get into the music,
Hmm.
the translators, we just
Yeah.
the music, and I can actually, if I give someone a drum and I play a certain a rhythmic prompt, a melodic prompt, a pattern, and
Hmm.
their part goes after, then every time they hear that prompt, they know that
Exactly.
it's a system. It's easy to figure out. It's something that I think a lot of people take for granted, but
Hmm.
you can actually kind of innately figure out different forms just by hearing them a few times.
Right.
And from my experience, I mean, I do work here, right? So it's Western,
Hmm.
people are exposed to Western music when I come in. So,
Right.
but I do have a lot of people from different cultures, and I don't know, we just improvise. My training
Uh-huh.
is, like I said, I have a lot of different trainings, but
Hmm.
one of them is Nora Robbins' approach to music therapy, and that's very improvisational based.
Yeah.
So it's really creating music in the moment.
Hmm.
And then I don't rely on whether or not they've heard the song before, and
Right.
I can use whatever scales and tones I want.
Hmm.
Um, so I kind of go lot on how the client is already responding to me. You
Right.
can tell really easily if the person's not connecting, and then you just try
Exactly.
different things.
I like when I was hanging out with my grandpa in India, I had a similar experience. Like I was singing a song that he knew and he started like he didn't remember the lyrics, but he started just like humming along because he was so familiar with it. And it was just so incredible to see that. I was like, wow. And then
Yeah.
later he was like, "Oh, could you give me the lyrics? Like I really want to like sing this song and everything." And I think it's just so cool how when you connect with someone's music taste and like someone's music love for music, how much you can really do for them and like mentally.
Yeah, I mean, music, the emotional part. I mean, we didn't even talk about the emotional part of
Yeah.
music because that's one that's harder to talk about, I think, because it's harder to
Hmm.
understand exactly what's happening. I
Right.
mean, you can easily just whittle down and say, oh, it's an emotional, neuron fires this way. But
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
why, right? Because it's really
Yeah,
different. You and I could hear the same music and it'll do nothing for me, but then you hear it and it's like, oh my God, I love this song. And it makes you excited,
exactly.
which has a lot to do with what you've been exposed to or what your your interests are.
Hmm.
Sorry, excuse me. But but yeah, when you find the right music for someone, especially someone who's non-speaking, let's say
Hmm.
there's someone who's, either for whatever reason they're unable to speak.
Right.
Um, and I had someone like that once he was referred to me because he was incredibly aggressive. He was becoming aggressive, not aggressive and physically aggressive, but just so angry all the time.
Right. Uh-huh.
And he was someone who had a traumatic brain injury. And he had
Mm.
very limited expressive language. And it had
Wow.
been many, many years since his accident. But in order to get to know him, when he was referred to me, I wanted to see what's his favorite music, and I talked to some of the staff that knew him, and so they gave me some of his favorite bands, and he
Hmm.
was really into music. And when I played it for him, just the way
Oh my
he
God.
lit up, and he just like stood up and
Whoa.
wanted to dance,
Oh
and
my
just
God.
the change in his affect, he's just smiling and like laughing, and
Oh,
it's like. and you try to think, what happened? What is that? Why does someone respond that way? And
Yeah.
that's hard to explain. You can actually probably go into the brain and see the things that are happening in there. But
Uh-huh.
the fact that it's so different from person to person is what makes
Mm-hmm.
music therapy to me just fascinating, right? You
Right.
can't write a prescription that says this song is going to create joy in this person because you just don't
Exactly.
know. You never know. And that's what makes it interesting
Mm-hmm.
and exciting.
Yeah, it's so improvisational. Like you have to, it's different for every person. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on your goals. Like there are certain goals that you probably it's less important, I guess,
Right.
what music
Mm-hmm.
you're using if you're trying to reach a very specific goal. But in terms of the
Mm-hmm.
emotional responses and trying to get to someone's intrinsic motivation, where they're actually the one leading this because they really want to and they really enjoy and they're very connected, that's
Uh-huh.
very personal from person to person. And it's very different from person to person and
Right.
unique. And that's what makes it fun, I think,
Yes,
because
exactly.
when you talk about getting to know someone,
Mm-hmm.
getting to know them by what they tell you and then getting to know them by sharing music is a very different
Yeah.
experience.
Music is such a universal language. Like it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are enough universal aspects to languages, to different cultures, because I think, there is something to say different cultures have, like I said, different musical systems, but there is a
Exactly.
universality to certain things in
Uh-huh.
music
Mm-hmm.
that I think just makes it,
Yeah,
fascinating to me, I guess.
it's so fascinating. The other thing I wanted to ask was, so there's so many like technological advancements like right now going on, and how do you think music therapy is going to advance in the next 10 years with new technology and, you know, like new advancements that are coming right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have this conversation a lot because of AI, right? AI is
Mm-hmm.
coming out
Yeah.
and there's just so many things you can do with AI.
Right.
And when we first locked down for the pandemic and
Uh-huh.
everything went online,
Mm-hmm.
that was a shock to a lot of people like me, music therapists who relied on
Exactly.
live music therapy, right?
Uh-huh.
And it was a real sudden shock and you had to really figure out what am I supposed to do with my client online.
Exactly.
Now, there were a lot of things that came from that and software and different kinds of apps and things that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it kept it alive. It kept connections in terms of use video connections that we could do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that there's an aspect of therapy, the therapeutic relationship aspect. You can do, there's plenty of therapy happening online as well. And you can establish relationships as long as you can communicate. I do personally think there is something about sharing the energy
Mm-hmm.
in the same room. You can
Yes,
feel
definitely.
different things. You can feel when
Right.
someone's emotion changes. You can feel when their affect changes. Like when they're, if even if you're not looking at them, sometimes you can tell if there's a sudden change in their mood,
Right.
um, that you can't feel in
Mm-hmm.
another aspect.
Yeah, that's so true.
So I would be curious to see, I mean, whether we like it or not, I think AI is going to come into every aspect of our lives. And I think
Yeah.
that music therapy is no different. And there are benefits because there are people who can't be reached, who can't come in person. There,
Right.
we were able to reach some of those people who couldn't come in,
Yeah.
and now some of those people are still doing their therapies online because they
Wow.
really liked that. And so
Mm-hmm.
there is a positive aspect to this that I think will make it more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I want to know that the therapeutic relationships and the things that are most important in terms of being able to feel and really understand a person, um, will somehow be incorporated into this new technology that comes.
Right.
Because I have no doubt that things are going to keep coming up,
Yes,
in music
definitely.
therapy. I think it's definitely going to change. The digital music world is just already different just from before
Mm-hmm.
COVID and after this lockdown. It's really different.
Right.
Um, I do, use some apps that are helpful now.
Uh-huh.
But like for example, one of the things we do a lot in music therapy is songwriting. And that can be
Mm-hmm.
used with all kinds of populations. If you're working with
Wow,
someone with
yeah.
major depressive disorder or someone with, real anxieties,
Mm-hmm.
songwriting can be really beneficial. but part of that songwriting process is the process of writing the music with the person in the room,
Right.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to get an authentic understanding of that
Mm-hmm.
person, and a lot of communication is nonverbal,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe it's the exchange of energy, right? And
Right.
so you could just write, you can just say, you can plug in a lot of information that a person gives you, and then say, hey, write a song, about this, and an amazing song will
Exactly.
come out. But is that
Yeah.
really going to capture the nonverbal part?
Mm.
Is it going to capture that nonverbal communication that would have come if you were sharing this space and writing together in the moment,
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah.
can't be communicated online?
Exactly.
There is an aspect that cannot be communicated. You can't, does it understand sarcasm? Does it
No, yeah.
understand nuances of of something said with a tone to it that
Mm-hmm.
has actually a deeper meaning?
Right.
Does it understand that? Because that would
Uh-huh.
be important in someone writing music. If you're trying to really capture and help somebody
Uh-huh.
express something from their deepest places and deepest
Right.
emotion and deepest thoughts
Mm-hmm.
that they won't convey through their words,
Mm.
what will, it's just, I don't know, it's an interesting topic because it comes up a
Yeah.
lot. People ask me oftentimes, what about AI and music therapy? And
Exactly.
I don't know, it's coming.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, there are a lot of benefits, and the accessibility of it, and the ease of creating different musical products
Mm-hmm.
is gonna, it's gonna be a lot easier to make, really music that sounds really great.
Right.
But that's never really the goal of music therapy, is never the
Yeah.
musical product,
Yeah.
actually. So
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah. I
people
feel
just,
like
yeah.
it's just makes it a little less personal, and I think we'll see how it'll go. Like, there's no way of really knowing what AI is gonna do, like now.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know how it's gonna be in 10 years. Like, if it's gonna be able to do all that personal, like understand sarcasm and all that. I don't think we'll know until it happens. And that's
Yeah.
crazy. It's
Yeah, but I mean, even, when we were in this pandemic, and I did do some, songwriting or even singing in sort of turn-taking fashion
uh-huh.
online with somebody who's primarily isolated during the day, all day by themselves, and then
Oh
I
yeah.
did have that connection. There's still something very beneficial about what happened, that wouldn't have been there without the digital aspect.
That's
So
very true.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of positives.
Yeah.
I hope that it's done like everything with AI. I hope it's done responsibly.
That's yeah, very true.
Yeah. And keeping the definition of what music therapy is supposed to be. I just hope that's always part of it.
Exactly. Okay, to wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, for any aspiring music therapists like me and other students my age, what would you recommend to get started, and how would you recommend progressing into that career?
Well, I think it's funny with the addition of AI and digital, that it's probably less important than it was before, but generally,
Mm-hmm.
music therapist wants to be able to play a harmonic instrument of some sort,
Mm,
because you want something to support your voice. So
right.
usually a therapist is going to use a voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then some sort of instrument to support
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Now there are wind players and players of melodic instruments who are working, but in general, most of the music therapy programs I know will ask you to play a harmonic instrument at some sort of level of proficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So guitar, ukulele, piano,
Yeah.
something that gives you a harmonic support of a melody, because with a
Mm-hmm.
harmony, you can that just gives you more versatility in terms of like, emotional aspects and things that you want to be able to change moods or whatever. It just
Oh
gives you
yeah.
more so playing, practicing on one, at least one harmonic
Yeah.
instrument.
Yeah.
I think understanding and knowing yourself as a musician and what
Uh-huh.
what moves you in music is
Mm-hmm.
important.
Right.
And then I would, so skill wise, you just want to, get your proficiency up, be comfortable with your instruments. but be comfortable and know your instruments, meaning your voice as well, and whatever instrument
Right.
you do play.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that's the musical side of it. And then I think, I think just maybe, if you, it depends on if you already know kind of what you're thinking of work, where you're thinking of working. I just think there are
Hmm.
aspects of music therapy that, kind of cross with psychology,
Right.
they cross
Yeah.
with education,
Hmm.
with learning, different kinds of learning disabilities and, things just um, kind of getting exposure into different areas like that will give you sort of an idea of, you know, what music therapy is. I think it's exploring what is it more than um, just kind of knowing the definition so you actually really understand what music therapy is before you decide you want to do that for a living because it's not um it's to me it's so fulfilling and it's exciting
Right.
and it's a
Definitely.
way to use my craft in a way that's actually helping people and keep someone else in
Right.
the focus rather than myself.
Uh-huh.
But it's still a helping profession, a service profession where you're it's not something you probably want to go into if you think I just want to be rich and
Oh,
make all
that's
kinds
fair.
of money. You're just not. I wouldn't, I wouldn't question like, is this what you want to do? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're still a service that you're providing is not
Mm-hmm.
just in itself going to get you that richness that that the money that you it's not you want to come into it right for the right reasons and
Exactly. Yeah, that's fair. And lastly, just to end it all off, I wanted to ask you, what was your favorite musical that you worked in when you were working in Broadway and West End?
um what's my favorite musical? I mean, there's just been a bunch, but my
Mm-hmm.
probably my favorite was be my first ones my first experiences maybe because they were um early. There's probably two shows that I did that I just loved.
Mm-hmm.
Hair, the musical,
Yeah,
is just one of my favorites. The music is just so moving.
right.
And I had a really great relationship with the composer, Galt
Uh-huh.
McDermott, and I worked with him for many, many years in his band after that. We
Mm-hmm.
used to do these concerts, and he was just a great human being. He was just a great
Wow.
person. He was a great musician. It was really inspiring to see him. So that just sits in my heart and will always. And his music, I just love it. Like the songs from that show. And the other one is Les Miserables.
Oh my God, I love that
Also, just the
musical.
musical that I love. It's just I
I love
always
it.
loved that music, and so
Mm-hmm.
and I got to do it in Germany, in
Wow.
German, and so it was a little bit different. But
Wow.
it's still like it was when I actually I remember the night before, no, the opening night for me when I went into the show. This other guy next to me just turned to me. He's like, "Can you believe this is happening?" And we were
Oh
listening
my
to the
God.
orchestra start playing, and was like, "Oh my God, this is like so
Wow.
exciting!" It's just so
The
that
core
those are
memory.
yeah, those are probably my absolute all-time favorites, favorite
Wow.
experiences. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming. This was
Yeah, this
so,
is
so cool.
that
And
was
I
really fun.
think I just want to add that every time you were talking about what you're doing in your like career and wi how you work with clients, I could just see how passionate you are about music therapy. And I think that's so incredible. And I
Oh,
hope I can be that passionate about my work one day.
oh, well, thank you. Well, it's a real pleasure to come on, and it's really nice talking to you, and I wish you all the very, very best.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And with your podcast too.
Thank you.